what's going on, you guys? Nick here with Nick Strength and Power. I've got a couple of interesting stories for you guys today. The first story that I've got for you guys today, the latest physique update from Chris Bumstead, and we're now less than a week and a half out from the Prague Pro, where Chris will be making his open bodybuilding debut. And kind of the first thing that I thought when I was watching this video that Chris posted, this posing video, was that we never really get to see Chris do a most muscular shot, because that's not one of the mandatory poses in Classic Physique, and it's even in the Classic Physique rules that when you do your favorite classic pose, it can't be a most muscular. So I was kind of thinking when I was watching this, the other interesting element of seeing Chris in open bodybuilding, aside from the fact that there's no weight limit, and aside from the fact there's obviously some differences in the judging, we're going to get to see him hit poses that we never get to see him hit, because in Classic Physique, there's 5 mandatory poses, and they're different from the 8 that are in open bodybuilding. So we're going to get to see Chris hit all 8 mandatory poses on stage with other bodybuilders. So we know how good Chris is in Classic and how good he fits the Classic standards, and we also know how he looks in those 5 poses. But we'll get to see kind of this different element of Chris here, because obviously open bodybuilding, with there being 8 poses, you got the front double, the front lat spread, the side chest, back double, back lat spread, side triceps, abs and thighs, and most muscular. And I'm curious here to see, now that Chris is actually judged on the front lat spread, which in my opinion is one of his best poses, we still see him hit it like in his routine. We see him hit it a lot on Instagram. It's a great pose for him that shows off not only his upper body width, but his incredible taper. And it's kind of cool because that's not actually a mandatory pose that's judged in Classic Physique, but it is a mandatory pose that's judged in open bodybuilding. So I'm curious to kind of see how Chris does with that being a pose that's actually judged, because if you go to Classic Physique, you just got the front double, the side chest, the back double, the abs and thighs, and your favorite classic pose, which again cannot be the most muscular. So we're going to get to see kind of a different Chris judged under a little bit different circumstances here, which might be to his advantage. But that was just kind of the most striking thing to me about this physique update from Chris, is you just don't really see him in a most muscular shot very often. So it was kind of weird seeing him in that pose, but it'll be interesting definitely to see him in open bodybuilding. Like I said, obviously the standards are a bit different between open and classic, but he's going to have to hit poses that he's not used to hitting in a competition. And like I said, I think some of those are going to work to his advantage, like that front lat spread. I think that'll be cool, and probably a tough pose for people to beat him in, even in open bodybuilding. And I think it would be kind of funny if just by weight, Chris ends up being the heaviest guy in this Prague show, because we know he weighs 260 at 2 weeks out. I don't believe Horse MD is that heavy. We know Martin is not that heavy. We don't really know who else is doing this show. Like I said, I think there's going to be a few surprises, because Prague, I think there's going to be quite the spotlight on that show. And it's, we heard earlier in the year that Neckzilla was supposed to be doing this Prague show. Now, since then, I've heard that he's not doing it, but it seems like you never really know with Neckzilla. I think it'd be very interesting to see him in a lineup with Chris Bumstead, because Chris is kind of the antithetical physique to Neckzilla's physique. Neckzilla is kind of just pure mass, size, just like the definition of open bodybuilding, unrestricted by any weight limit or really any thought of aesthetics. He's definitely not known for being an aesthetic open bodybuilder. He's just very size oriented, and Chris is kind of the opposite of that. So it would be very interesting to see them in the same lineup. But with Neckzilla, it's hard to tell. Who knows whether or not he's going to do this show? I've heard yes, I've heard no. I would play it safe and expect that he's not doing it. But it'd be very interesting to see him and Chris in the same lineup. But it would almost be more interesting to see Chris be potentially the heaviest guy in this lineup as his open debut. But again, a lot of Chris's body weight is just attributed to his size. He's also significantly taller than the average pro bodybuilder. I believe the average height for a pro bodybuilder is like 5'9". So Chris is significantly taller than that. But I'm just so curious, and I'm sure you guys are too, to see how this is judged, to see how Chris does in open bodybuilding because of these pretty major differences between classic physique and open bodybuilding. Chris is the best of the best in classic physique, but there are these differences. There's no weight cap. They've got different poses, different emphasis on aesthetics, and it's just going to be interesting to see how the best of the best in classic physique does as an open bodybuilder, because like you see these guys come from 212, right? And they do really well in open bodybuilding, but literally the only difference between 212 and open is that weight cap. They're judged exactly the same, just with a weight cap. The same poses, same emphasis on judging criteria, and that's why you see when these 212 guys, like Derek Lunsford, for example, come up to open bodybuilding, they do very well because they're basically just bigger versions of 212 when they come to open. So if they're successful in 212, it's the same judging criteria going into open. But with Chris, it's a little bit different. So even though he's a 6-time Mr. Olympian Classic Physique, it's not the same criteria, just without a weight limit. It's different criteria. So that's kind of the interesting part about this, is it's not judged the same as bodybuilding like the crossovers that we see from 212 to open. Now, next up in the news, we got another update from Rafael Brandao, this time a posing video shot at 4 days out from this weekend's Romania Pro. Now, Rafael has gone on record in addition to this update to make it clear that he will not be doing the Prague show. So he's not going to be competing with Chris Bumstead and Horse MD and Martin in Prague. He said his goal is just to do Romania, win Romania, and shut it down until the 2025 Mr. Olympia. He also said if he does not win the Romania show, he's going to do, I believe he's saying, the Big Man Weekend. He refers to it as the Europe Pro, but I believe he's talking about the December show this year. But it sounds like he's not doing Prague for sure. And his goal, or at least he has it in his mind, that he's just going to win Romania. And on paper right now, now that we have the full lineup, I still think he's the favorite to win Romania. Just going off of Olympia placings, he did place a placing ahead of Akeem Williams. And despite how impressive Akeem has been looking in his updates, I would say Rafael is still the on-paper favorite to win this thing. So his assumption that he's just going to win Romania and shut it down to the Olympia isn't that far-fetched. He looks pretty impressive in this video. I would say he definitely looked more impressive in some of the updates that we saw going into the Olympia. So I feel like it's kind of the opposite with him and Akeem, because I feel like Akeem looks a lot more impressive in his updates going into this weekend show than he looked in his updates going into the Olympia the week of the Olympia. But I feel like Rafael was, posting more updates the week going into the Olympia and looked better in the updates the week going into the Olympia than he does here. But he looks a little bit fuller in these updates going into Romania than he did in the Olympia. So who knows? I think at this point it could really be a coin toss between Rafael and Akeem going into Romania. Who's going to win? Because I think Akeem really looks pretty damn impressive. But Rafael does too. Let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. Who's going to win this weekend's Romania Pro, Rafael or Akeem? And whose updates do you think look more impressive at this point going into the show? Now, next up in the news, we also got some more recent physique updates today from Martin Fitzwater, who I think is the clear favorite to win the Prague show next weekend. And I think will be the biggest open bodybuilding hurdle for Chris Bumstead to try to overcome. And again, we talked about in the last video how Chris himself even said he doesn't fully plan on or expect or even intend to win his open bodybuilding debut. It sounds like he really just wants to do it for fun. And I think Martin being in that lineup is probably the biggest preventative thing to him winning that show. And again, we don't know the full lineup yet. Maybe we do miraculously see Neckzilla jump in there. We know Horse MD is in there. But I think, like, outside of Martin, outside of a top 10 Olympian in open bodybuilding, I think there's a lot of open bodybuilders that Chris Bumstead can and will beat at this show, or really any show. I just think the fact that there's a top 10 open Olympian, top 4 open Olympian even, in this lineup is the biggest problem for Chris, because frankly, I think Chris could hop in a lot of open shows, and if there's not a top 10 Olympian open guy in that show, I think Chris would do very well in most open lineups. Like Horse MD, for example. I think he's a great bodybuilder. I think Chris will beat him at this show. But I still think Martin's the favorite to win. I mean, based off these updates, based off his Olympia placing, he's just very, very complete. And he's really kind of in his prime right now. He's going to be very hard to beat. And I think especially, I was watching some of those comparison videos comparing Chris and Martin's physique. I think especially the back poses will be hard for Chris to beat Martin. I think Martin is very strong from the back. But like I said, some of the poses that Chris gets to do now as mandatory poses, like a front lat spread, with a shorter guy like Martin, where the front lat spread, where these short guys are like really densely muscled like Martin, like Nick, poses like the front lat spread on those guys don't look as good as a guy like Chris. So like I said, you know, some of these poses that Chris might get to hit now, or will get to hit now, might work to his advantage. But only time will tell. Now, the final story that I've got for you guys today, we got a recent physique update of Hadi Choopan. Now, it's been confirmed that Hadi will not be doing either Arnold Classic, I believe. For sure not the Arnold Classic Ohio. But he does not need to requalify for the Olympia, just to be clear. He's already qualified for next year's Olympia. He's qualified for life because he's won the Olympia. So obviously, this latest physique update, he's not in, you know, typical crazy Hadi Choopan conditioning. And I'm kind of wondering if this is the signifier that we're probably not going to see Hadi until the next Olympia. Like I said, Hadi already confirmed he's not doing the Arnold Classic. I don't really see him doing any show that's smaller than the Arnold, so I think he's just refocusing for the Olympia next year. But yeah, I think this physique update is probably an indicator that Hadi is just shutting it down, and we won't see him compete until whatever month the Olympia is next year. It seems like they change a month every year now. But it is kind of interesting to see Hadi not in crazy, dry, granite-peeled conditioning and looking a little bit more like an off-season bodybuilder, which is not something you typically see from Hadi. He almost looks like he's, you know, just peeled to the bone year-round. So it was kind of cool to see this, I guess. But that's going to wrap it up for the video, guys. Just a shorter one today. I hope you guys did, in fact, enjoy it. Make sure you like the video, subscribe to the channel, click that bell notification icon if you have not already. And as always, I love you guys. Appreciate you guys. Nick Strength and Power, signing out. All right, guys, don't forget to click that like button and subscribe to this channel if you enjoy the content. Also, check out my Instagram at NickStrengthPower. My Facebook page, which is simply Nick Strength and Power. My secondary YouTube channel, Nick Strength and Vlogs, for vlogs and bonus content that you will not see on this channel. And consider subscribing to my third YouTube channel, Nick Strength and Pokemon, which is all things Pokemon and trading card games, completely unrelated to this channel. So if you're into that, give that one a look. And all links to merchandise and social media will be in the description box below. If you guys want a Nick Strength and Power t-shirt, that will be in the Shopify link below. Have a great day.